अहस्तानि सहस्तानाम् अपदानि चतुष्पदां फाल्गुनी तत्र महतां जीवो जीवस्य जीवनम्. Ahastani Sahastanam. Those who are devoid of hands are prey for those who have hands. Apadani Chatuspadam. Those devoid of legs are prey for the four-legged. Phalguni Tatra Mahatam. Jivo Jivasya Jivanam. The weak are the food of the strong, and the general rule holds that one living being is food for another. The above lines emphasize the struggle for existence and the survival of the fittest, with the violence as the basis of the food cycle in nature. But humans are not just another animals in the creation. If we look back at the evolution of man, the primitive man was a cannibal. Then he progressed towards hunting as a means of survival. Slowly, with the development of cerebral capabilities, he started growing his food by agriculture. Throughout the history all over the world, the highest form of human potential always blossomed in intelligence, art, and connectivity, and not in ego, arrogance, and dominance. Ahimsa is the foundation of human progress. A classic example is the story of Emperor Ashoka. One of the greatest emperors of ancient India, Emperor Ashoka gave up the violence after winning the bloodshed disastrous Kalinga War. His heart echoed the pain and sorrow when he witnessed the scene of the war. The whole terrain was covered with the corpses of soldiers, wounded soldiers groaning in severe pain, vultures hovering their dead bodies, orphaned children mourning the loss of their father figures, and widows looking blank and despaired. This sight overwhelmed Emperor Ashoka. He realized that his victory at such a cost is not worthwhile. The whole war resulted in Ashoka's attraction towards Buddhism, and in following years he spread peace and harmony across the Mauryan Empire, which is why he is remembered even today. Ahimsa is the principle of not causing harm to other living things, and it is the opposite of Himsa. Himsa is harmfulness and causing pain and grief to self or other beings. Hence, Ahimsa means minimizing the effect of our thought, speech, and action to not hurt other living beings, including insects, birds, and animals. Although Ahimsa is considered a weak path in today's world, it takes great strength to control the mind and follow this path. Through Ahimsa, we detach from our harmful thought patterns and stay in the present moment. It is only in the present moment we learn to forgive and move on. Yet many of us are caught up in the past or worried about the future, which can often cause us harm. The basis of all the violence and hurt towards self or others is the fear, anger, guilt emotions being dominant in an individual. The emotion of anger is a survival instinct to activate fight or flight mechanism in all animals. But as humans, we need to take charge of our thinking brain rather than animalistic instincts. When we succumb to anger or violence, the root cause of these emotions is completely avoided, and rather, anger takes control to feel more powerful and take control of the situation. But does anger and violence really make us strong? Let's analyze what happens during anger to our body. The main parts of the brain that are responsible for our reactions to stress include the hypothalamus, the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex. When a person feels stressed or afraid, the amygdala releases stress hormones that prepare the body to fight the threat or flee from danger. Common emotions that trigger this response include fear, anger, anxiety, and aggression. So, all the energy is diverted to the limbic system, and the reactive brain becomes active and thinking brain becomes inactive. Hence, in moments of anger, a person loses his ability to think. After the amygdala sends a distress signal, the hypothalamus activates the adrenal glands to pump adrenaline into the bloodstream for fight or flight response. So instead of understanding the root of the problem, which is fear, there is escape mechanism. In order to understand the root of anger and fear, yoga teaches us to practice compassion towards self and others. Compassion gives the space to face our deep inner self without fear or guilt, to understand and bring transformation. It helps to understand the root of the problem, that is, the cause of fear, cause of anger, and face it with awareness. This is also proved scientifically. MRI scan shows that after an 8-week course of compassion and mindfulness practice, the brain's fight or flight center, the amygdala, appears to shrink. As the amygdala shrinks, the prefrontal cortex associated with higher order brain functions such as awareness, concentration, and decision making becomes stronger. This is the reason why practicing ahimsa and compassion towards self and others is the first step in the path of yoga. Ahimsa is the mother of all other yamas, namely Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, and Aparigraha. In the Yoga Sutras of Sadhana Pada, Maharshi Patanjali describes when a yogi is established in ahimsa, the very presence of such a person spreads positivity around. Ahimsa pratishtayam tatsannidhau vairatyagaha, which means by being established in ahimsa, enmity is given up in such a person's presence. Here is a beautiful story from the life of Gautama Buddha, one of the greatest teachers of the world, emphasizing the practice of ahimsa. Once, Gautama the Buddha was sitting under a tree giving a talk to an assembly of followers when a stranger suddenly appeared, pushing through the people in anger and rage and headed straight to the Gautama Buddha. He abused Buddha, used harsh words, and spat on Buddha's face. But Gautama, the Buddha, was unperturbed. He wiped it off, looking into the man's eyes, and asked earnestly, "What next? What do you want to say next?" The stranger was puzzled at this reaction of Buddha. Who asked such a thing? Always, when he had confronted people in the past, they had reacted either becoming enraged themselves or scared to avoid the fight. But here the Buddha wasn't angry or offended or cowardly. The calm tone of "what next" left him at a loss of words. The Buddha's disciples, however, became quite perturbed, demanding the stranger be punished. "All of you keep silent," Gautama Buddha said to his disciples. "This man has not offended me, but you have. You have lived with me for years now, and still you react. This is a stranger we have never met before. He must have heard something from others about me. Thus, he has formed an idea about me. He hasn't spit on me at all, but instead on the idea he is carrying." At this, his disciples fell silent. He turned his eyes to the stranger once again. "This is why I ask, what next?" The man tried to answer, but he was at a loss of words and remained silent. He was unable to make sense of what had just happened. There wasn't any anger left in him, nor any other emotion. He suddenly felt devoid of everything. Not knowing what else to do, he went away quietly. He could not sleep that night. His mind kept thinking of Buddha's expressionless, calm face, and he could not forgive himself for what he had committed to the holiness. Nothing made sense anymore. Instead, everything he thought he had understood had been stripped away. Being in the Buddha's presence had shaken him to the core. The next morning, before the sun had risen above the horizon, he was back in the saint's presence, this time throwing himself at Buddha's feet. He looked up into the face that had haunted him the entire night. Now the man asked for forgiveness. "Forgive me for what I did yesterday," he implored as tears began to roll down his cheeks. The Buddha said, "Forgive? I am not the same man on whom the offense was committed. The Ganges goes on flowing. It is never the same Ganges again. Much has happened in these 24 hours, so it is impossible to forgive you because no grudge is held against you." The man who had spit on Buddha's face only a day prior was now kneeling at his feet, humbled and transformed. Although Buddha was a skilled warrior himself, as he was trained in martial arts, when he was the crown prince as Siddhartha, he never used those skills to prove his dominance. Buddha's message to the world: the true strength is not anger and violence, the true strength is compassion. Ahimsa paramo dharmaha. Being conscious in one's thought, speech, and action to not hurt another living being is the highest way of living. Thanks for watching. If you like this content, kindly like and subscribe to my channel. Also, you can now support on patreon.com if you wish to support the making of more such videos. Samatvam Simplified. Find your balance with yoga and ancient wisdom.